first thing I told him was that you want to realize that the enemy of curiosity is self-doubt. I think those are the moments that you end up looking back on. You're like, that's what made my experience really special. It was those kinds of people. And when you start there, I think that's what actually allows you to be a really great conversationalist. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Chasing Lightning podcast. I'm your host, Caleb Murado, and I help you live slow, move fast, and start things so that you can do so sustainably. I think I'm going to keep that first part. Yeah, let's do it. Let's keep that. Yeah, so really glad to be back. And I'm actually going to start by saying, really cool announcement. The Chasing Lightning podcast is now on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So now you don't get to see my lovely face or not so lovely face. But now you can also listen to my voice when you're cooking, walking, working out at the gym, wherever you are in the mornings, whatever your routine is. I don't care. You can listen to me on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So really happy about that. So the conversation that I wanted to have with you guys today actually comes from a conversation that I was having with a friend pretty recently. And we were just talking about the situation where you're in a room with people that you just don't know, and you have to find a way to break in. You have to find a way to be able to introduce yourself or to break into those kinds of environment where you can integrate with people that either don't have similar interests, you just don't feel like you're going to resonate with. And one of the things that I found interesting is that the friend I was talking to, he's a student entrepreneur, he's a co-founder, and I think for me to hear that is like, this could be a major problem for a lot of people who are also going through it. And because of the way that I'm also designed, I find it a lot easier to integrate into those kinds of environments without having to spend as much energy trying to figure out what to say, how to come across. And I thought that today I would just spend some time sharing some of the feedback that I gave him, because I just took some time to really reflect into my design, into what is usually very intuitive for me, and to really share it into principles that you can easily apply. And the first thing I told him was that you want to realize that the enemy of curiosity is self-doubt. And in that context where you're just meeting people for the first time, the moment you start to doubt yourself or to just think about yourself in a way, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, or I don't think that I am ready for this moment. And I've been there sometimes. I realize, if I want to bring a spirit into this environment, to meet people, to get to give them the gift of who I am, I want to make sure I show up being curious about who they are. And I realized that what I do is I usually try to find out, okay, what are some thoughts that are going through my head right now? What are some of the things that I'm realizing where I'm like, you know what? Even though I feel like I won't be able to resonate with this person, maybe there's something about them that I can tap into that I can just talk to them about for 5 or 10 minutes. So I have that I run that through my head, and it's usually pretty quick for me. But if you're just starting that process, it can feel like, this is a bit unnatural. But once you realize that the enemy of curiosity is self-doubt, you'll be able to catch on thoughts that are just blocking you from being curious in environments and being curious about other people really quickly. So that's the first thing that I share with him that I found to be really insightful. And I've been thinking about that a lot. And I think that self-doubt, especially when you're talking with others, it can show up really quickly in ways that we don't really recognize. So being able to walk yourself through that process, what are some of the thoughts of self-doubt that I have, is one of the first things I recommend you do. So after you do that, the other thing that really helps me be grounded in these kinds of environments is to identify touch points. So in the example that my friend was telling me about, he went to a networking event, and I think it was related to one of the big 4 consulting firms. I think it was PwC. And one of the things that he told me is there are all these different groups of people, master students, undergrads, and they're all kind of in their cliques, and it can be kind of hard to find something where you can just both talk about. And I think the process of finding a common ground with someone that you don't know, even before you get to know them, that's called a touch point. Finding a touch point just even like while you're in that room, you don't have to be intentional about finding it before you get there. I do this all the time when I'm in the room. It can be extremely useful. So in the example of the PwC event, I told them, you know that these students, regardless of how old they are, regardless if they're a master's student and you might be a sophomore in undergrad, like regardless of your situation, you know that they're there so that they can get a job at PwC potentially, right? So first thing I would ask them was like, so what makes you interested in PwC? Is like the first thing that comes to my mind, right? So finding stuff like that, or maybe if you are talking to a group of grad students that are at this kind of event, it might be worth asking how is the job search going for them? I know, like as grad students, you going through that kind of going through the process of finding a job when you're in grad school, it can be really hard. I just love to know, like, what's the job search? How's that going? What are some of the things you're running into? And I think once you get out of your shell in terms of self-doubt, that becomes really easy. And I love to just like go into those rabbit holes or just try to find these like touch points where I can connect with the person I'm talking to more easily. So I would say like that's the second step. The last thing I told them that I find to be very helpful, especially if you're not in a place where you want to talk to people, but you have to, and especially if they're people that you don't know. One thing that I found extremely helpful to break out of that mode is by starting really small, by making people feel like they're heard. And I think this is actually one of the things that tie into one of the principles of this podcast, which is living slow, is really taking the time to find people that normally wouldn't get talked to. One of my favorite examples of this is if you're at an event and there's like a waiter just like handling like, I don't know, whatever space they're in. One of the things I'll do is I'll just go up to them and just like say, hey, like how are things going for you? What is your input on this event? And I find that those people are usually the most fun to talk to because they've worked there for a while. They've been a part of several events. So probably share some things that they've observed from previous events. And you just give them the chance to feel like they are heard. I think that's a gift. And one thing I realized is when you start really small, it doesn't have to be speaking to like the biggest person in the room or like someone that is there for the event. Starting there allows you to not just get out of your shell, but it opens you to like a whole nother world of conversations. Even when I'm actually thinking back to a conversation I was having today. So in my school, there's this place called the Eagle's Nest, and it's like a place where you can buy like a bunch of like random stuff. It's like a 7-Eleven, but for on campus. And one of the ladies that worked there, shout out to Sandy, she was just telling me like how she's been working there for like 21 years, and she's just been able to like witness the growth of all these students and just like get to like see their journeys as they graduate. And I'm one of those students. I'm a sophomore. I told her, well, you're going to get 2 more years of me. So that's unfortunate. I was joking. But, it's stuff like that, right? I think those are the moments that you end up looking back on. You're like, oh, that's what made my experience really special. It was those kinds of people. And when you start there, I think that's what actually allows you to be a really great conversationalist because it just expands your palette. And I would say that's what helps me the most whenever I'm in a place where I feel like, I don't feel like I even belong in this room. You just start like with people that are just around you. And it's just like, man, it just makes the process so much easier. So that's it. I think that's really what I want to share with you guys because I feel like these are questions I get a lot. It's like, how is Caleb able to go into any room and be able to like integrate himself into those environments really quickly, regardless of how well I know people? And I think those are just a few things. I know I'm pretty sure there's more, but I think those are probably some of the more important things I run myself through to help me get into that mode. So I hope you guys find that helpful. And again, I would love for you guys to go on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you have an iPhone, go to Apple Podcasts. If not, then go to Spotify. Even if you do have an iPhone, you listen to Spotify, go there and follow the show, leave a rating. It helps the platform so much. And I really appreciate all the support you guys have been giving on this platform on YouTube so far. And if you're on YouTube, leave a like, subscribe, hit a notification bell. Thank you so much for supporting me on this platform as well. And if you found at least one thing that was helpful in today's episode, then share it with someone who's like you because they'll probably find it helpful as well. And for all the people that have stuck with me until the end of the episode, I just want to share that the next 2 episodes, there will also be guest features with amazing entrepreneurs. I cannot wait to share that content with you guys. And I guess I'll be seeing you in that next episode. Peace.